Two bankruptcies, one star designer, an SUV built in someone else's factory. How does a company pull off the hardest part of launching a car and still run out of road? This is the story of Fisker, the brand that tried to hack the auto industry twice and learned the one rule you can't outsource: responsibility. Henrik Fisker didn't enter the scene as a typical founder in a hoodie. He arrived as a celebrity designer, the kind whose pen gave life to the BMW Z8 and the Aston Martin Deep 9. In the late 2000s, when green still meant compromise, he set out to prove you could have drama and conscience in the same garage. The first attempt was Fisker Automotive, and its headline act was the Karma, a low, wide, him-to-sheet metal plug-in hybrid that looked like a concept car somehow rolled off a runway and onto the street. For a moment, it felt like the future had arrived early. Government loans validated the mission. Early customers lined up for something that didn't exist anywhere else: a beautiful eco-luxury car that made the Prius look like an appliance. Then the realities of building cars, the stuff you don't see in glossy launch videos, began to leak in. Suppliers missed targets, delays stacked, bad luck piled on top of bad timing. When a superstorm sent salt water through a shipping yard and into hundreds of brand new cars, that was more than a headline. It was a cash flow event. The dream didn't die, it simply changed hands. Assets went to a new owner, the car was revived under a different badge, and the first Fisker chapter closed. You'd be forgiven for thinking that was the end. It wasn't. Because if design is your superpower, you don't quit, you iterate. In 2016, Henrik opened a new book, Fisker Inc. The plan was clever and in a way humble. Lesson learned: don't try to be Tesla in year one. Don't pour billions into concrete and cranes. Build the brand, build the car, let an expert build the car for you. This time the hero product wasn't a low-slung Grand Tourer. It was an electric SUV, the Ocean, because that's where families, margins, and market share live. The pitch landed like a checklist of what buyers actually want. Long range, clean Scandinavian lines, some delight features you'd brag about at a charger, and a price that didn't make your accountant faint. Most bold of all, production would happen at a world-class contract manufacturer. Skip production hell, go straight to deliveries. That was the promise. And here's the part that many people gloss over. They actually got cars built, not prototypes, not a dozen pre-production mules, real customer-bound SUVs. In an industry littered with beautifully rendered press releases, Fisker crossed the line only a handful of startups ever reach. Vehicles leaving a factory with a logo that had never survived the test before. For a while, the momentum felt like redemption. Cars shipped to Europe, then to the United States. Reviewers praised the design. Early owners posted the range numbers they were getting. This was happening. But a car company is not just metal and glass. In 2020, you could still be forgiven for thinking the hardest problems were the old ones: engines, panels, rust. Today, the heartbeat is software. Millions of lines that decide whether the thing you paid for feels premium or unfinished, intuitive or infuriating. And this is where the second act began to wobble. Reports trickled in about glitches you can't photograph for Instagram. A screen freeze here, a lock that won't unlock there, a system that needs a reboot at the worst moments. Nothing that looked catastrophic in isolation. Just enough sand in the gears to turn early adopters into reluctant beta testers. The company worked on fixes and pushed updates, but trust is slower to recharge than a battery. Each headline chipped away at the idea that the shortcut had worked. Meanwhile, the accounting clock kept ticking. Outsourcing assembly lowered the mountain of capital expenditure, but it didn't remove the cost of everything else: service networks, logistics, parts, customer support, and the ruthless arithmetic of scaling. You can rent a factory, but you can't rent a reputation. As cars accumulated in inventory and cash got tighter, the company pivoted on the go-to-market side, looking to dealer partners after starting with direct sales. On paper, it broadened reach. In practice, changing distribution mid-flight adds friction to a machine already running hot. Investors who had embraced the story during the SPAC era were watching a different film now. The EV market was no longer a new frontier. It was a battlefield. Legacy automakers had arrived with war chests and service bays in every zip code. Other startups were fighting their own fires. Raising money got harder. News about pauses in production, talks with potential partners, and listing troubles created a slow, grinding pressure that every founder recognizes. The oxygen in the room gets thinner, one press release at a time. When the second bankruptcy filing hit, it didn't feel like a sudden explosion as much as a light fading. If the first collapse had come at the hands of a young, fragile ecosystem, a storm surge, a broken supply chain, the second felt more modern, a software-centric, capital-hungry, expectations-heavy reality closing in. The ocean as a product had so much right: the silhouette, the numbers, the thoughtful touches that made you smile on a test drive. But businesses aren't judged on their best day, they're judged on their worst week. That's the heart of the Fisker story. Twice a visionary tried to outsmart the physics of the car business. The first time, the enemy was the brutal cost of building a car from scratch. The second time, the enemy was the brutal cost of owning the customer experience when someone else builds the car. In both cases, the brand was responsible for everything the buyer touches. You can delegate the line. You can't delegate the feeling when the door handle sticks, or the app won't connect, or the service appointment is 2 states away. There are details inside this that matter. Going public early gave access to capital, but it also put the company on a quarterly clock that doesn't care about how hard it is to debug a new platform. Leading with range got attention, but longevity belongs to the teams that turn software updates into a predictable rhythm instead of a rescue mission. Pivoting to dealers can open doors, but it takes time to teach every showroom how to sell, deliver, and support a new brand. None of these moves were crazy. They were logical responses to real pain points. They just weren't fast enough, and cars are unforgiving when you're late. If you're an owner, this saga translates into very human questions. Who fixes my car? Where do the parts come from? What happens to resale value when a brand becomes a chapter in a documentary? Those answers change over time, and third-party networks often step in. But even when the practical problems get solved, the emotional math stays messy. You didn't buy a VIN, you bought a promise. You bought the feeling of backing a challenger with taste. If you're a rival, the lessons are bright as brake lights. First, contract manufacturing can be brilliant, but it isn't a cheat code. It trades fixed cost for variable cost and speed for dependency. It solves one problem and creates 3 others: coordination, accountability, and service. Second, design gets you in the door, but reliability keeps you at the table. Range numbers, big screens, party tricks, those start conversations. A flawless morning commute finishes them. Third, don't confuse shipping with succeeding. The day your first batch rolls out is not the finish line. It's when the real work starts. Support tickets are product. OTA releases are product. Your dealership training is product. And finally, raise more money than feels comfortable, because nothing expands like the definition of done when thousands of customers are discovering edge cases in parallel. There's another angle worth sitting with. Fisker understood something visceral about this market. Lots of people don't want an engineer's car. They want an artist's car that happens to be electric. They want warmth and personality in a segment that can feel like a spec sheet competition. That sensitivity to taste, the way a door shut sounds, the way the stance makes you glance back in a parking lot, wasn't a gimmick. It was the core. In a better timeline, the software hums, the service hums, and the ocean becomes the statement piece for families who love design. In our timeline, the gap between vision and execution stayed just wide enough to trip on. So was the idea doomed. Number, it was daring. It poked at a blind spot in the EV gold rush. The assumption that you either go full Tesla, vertical, merciless, monastic, or you're not serious. Fisker tried to prove a third path. Assemble the best partners, keep the capital light, move fast on the fun stuff customers notice. The truth we're left with is subtler. You can outsource metal. You can't outsource accountability. Customers don't care whose name is on the factory. They care whose name is on the badge. 2 bankruptcies don't erase the signal inside the noise. They tell us how hard this really is. They tell us that making a great EV is not the same as making a great EV company. They tell us that design can win hearts, but durability wins time. And they leave behind a question for the next wave of founders with big pencils and bigger dreams. If you skip the pain that shapes you, your own plant, your own service, your own bruises, do you accidentally skip the muscles you need when things go wrong? Maybe that's the final note here. Fisker was never just building a car. It was trying to build a shortcut through production hell, through capital intensity, through the tedious parts of the business that don't look good on stage. It worked until the day it didn't. And when the checks bounced, the only thing left was the brand's original gift, a sense of what a beautiful electric future could feel like. Whether another company picks up those ideas or owners keep them alive on the road for years to come, the lesson is already in the rear view. Vision sets the destination. Execution gets you there. In the car world, you need both.